Another great impact idea is a quote or a testimonial from an expert or from a customer or client. And those can work really, really well to help you build credibility, because now it's not me saying it, it's this expert saying this thing that I'm talking about. It's not me saying it, it's a customer that is giving me this information. So it gives you more credibility. Now, a couple of things about quotes that you really want to keep in mind. I gotta admit, I bet the first 10 years or so, maybe 12 years that I was a professional speaker, I was actually being paid to go out and speak in front of big organizations. I really shied away from quotes. And the reason why is because I just watched people, as I was kind of growing up in the industry, use quotes in just really weird ways that didn't work. So like the thing that was always made me squeamish was when somebody like a trainer or a teacher would put a quote up on a slide, like a PowerPoint slide, and just say, as you read that quote, how does that make you feel? Or what do you think about that quote? You know, and I was like, oh man, that was like fingernails on the chalkboard to me, because to me, that just seemed like a waste of time. It wasn't until I started really doing more keynote speeches where I was, the purpose was to be more motivational and inspirational. And that's when I really got back into adding more quotes into my presentations. Now, I always use quotes in limited ways. So like, for instance, if I was doing a sales presentation and I could put in a really, really short, easy quote from one of my customers or an expert or something like that, something that I could remember, I didn't have to write it down, I didn't have to put it on a slide, then I use that a lot. Like, for instance, when I'm teaching how to do a presentation, I use a Zig Ziglar quote a lot. Zig Ziglar, when he a famous motivational speaker, by the way, when he was on the presentation trail and he was going and doing speeches all over the world, one of the things that he used to say that caught on was, if you're going to give a good presentation, you got to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So basically he was saying, give them an introduction, then go and get your meat of the presentation, then at the end, summarize it. And I've used that quote for years and years and years, just because it's a great way to reinforce the thing that I'm trying to get across to the audience, which is to use a summary at the end of your presentation, which we'll get to later. But basically, it's a quote that I've used very effectively. When I started doing the more motivational speeches, though, I started figuring out some really cool ways to use quotes that work really well. And I got this from Les Brown, by the way. Les Brown, very famous motivational speaker, especially back in the 90s. And one of the techniques that Les Brown would use that was just, he used it really, really well. He would start off with his own kind of Les Brownism, like a quote or a teaching point that he wanted to get across in his motivational speech. And then he would reinforce that with something famous that something that a famous person said that was close to what he said. And then he would go back and tell an emotional story or an inspirational story about some time that he put that to practice in his own life. So he used those three pieces, and he did that over and over and over again. If you ever watch a Les Brown speech, that's what you'll see over and over and over again. His Les Brownism, a very famous quote, and then a really inspirational, fun, high energy kind of story that kind of gets the emotional juices flowing. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of add those in. But so I'd encourage you, if you want to add more credibility to your speech, add in a quote from some famous people or from a customer or a client, something like that. And typically it'll work really well with your audiences.